there's a decision to make. Either we're going to pay on the front end and let's hire the staff to get the job done, or you're going to pay on the back end and these patients sue you because you did something wrong and you didn't follow the IFU.
I think there just has to be stronger support there to help these chapters get through these transitions, as well as just continuing to help them build their gain strength in their territory, in their area.
Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of the healthcare industry committed to getting it right every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Michael Matthews, Hank Balch, and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Brian Reynolds and Tony Thurmond, the two ISHM President-Elect candidates for 2018. Brian is the Assistant Chief of Sterile Processing Services at the Birmingham VA Medical Center, and Tony is the Central Services Manager at the Christ Hospital Health Network in Ohio. We are excited to introduce you to both candidates on this week's episode of Beyond Clean. And Hank, Mike, exciting time of the year. We see where the direction of ISHM is going to go in terms of leadership for 2019.
Yeah, Justin, you hit the nail right on the head that this really is about the direction of the largest certification body in the world for this particular profession. And so, this is a critical election, just like all the other elections, that we want to know, where is our industry headed?
It's the most wonderful time of the year, guys. I mean, can you beat exciting elections, campaigns, speeches, and even now we got the candidates on our podcast to hear directly from them. I cannot wait to get to this show.
Yeah, and I also want to thank both candidates for getting back to us so quickly, getting on the schedule to record this. They both prepared in advance of the interview, but again, on short notice. They both have great things to say. I think they both have interesting platforms. I know the listeners are going to be excited to hear what they have to say coming up in just a couple of minutes. First, you can follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info. Facebook page is facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast. LinkedIn, you can find us there, linkedin.com/company/Beyond Clean. We also have an Instagram page. You can search for us, Beyond Clean Podcast, and there you'll find anonymous pictures shared from department managers and staffers across the country. And if you'd like to contribute an anonymous photo yourself, or if you have ideas for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We'll be right back with Brian Reynolds. Joining us now is Brian Reynolds, Assistant Chief of Sterile Processing Services at the Birmingham VA Medical Center. And Brian, excited to have you on this episode of Beyond Clean. I know that voting is going to begin tomorrow, and there's been a nice write-up in ISHM with a little bit of a biography, but maybe for our listeners, give us a little bit of a background on who you are and how you ended up working in sterile processing.
Well, working in sterile processing ended up being a happen chance. It was something that I sort of kind of stumbled into. And from there, 27 years later, I've actually been doing this for 27 years. It's been an interesting ride. And I started out in the private sector. I worked for Florida Hospital for 16 years and other hospitals along the way. I've been with the VA Medical Center for the last 6 years, well, almost 6 years. And that's most of my experience.
So, Brian, obviously, this president position is all about leadership, and I know we can see in your write-up and communique that you've had a lot of opportunity to lead in various different contexts. Can you go through a little bit about just what your experience was at the department level in terms of leadership, but then also at the chapter level?
Department-wise, I started out as a technician. As I was doing the technician, I was also working in management and retail management for a while. So I was working both jobs for quite a few years. Never really thought about the management side of this when it came to sterile processing. At some particular point, it was just a job at that point. As I started learning more and I started applying different things and going to different seminars and just different mentors that I had along the way, it became a career for me. At that particular point, I started doing a lot more when it came to education. I did my certification, had it twice before Isham became what it is now, and let it go. And then I decided to do it again. Once I did that, I got my CIS and my CHL. And from that point, I've been a part of the chapter, Central Florida Association of Central Service Personnel. And I used to attend all the time. At that particular time, it was Susie McDonald, Jamel Cato, Peter Munnis, and also Beverly McClellan. And they just made sure that I was involved in the process. They taught me a lot of what I know. I credit a lot of what I do when it comes to education to those particular people. They decided that they wanted to retire and do other things because they said it just became a lot and too much for them to do. So they gave the chapter to someone else. That person didn't really do a lot with it. And then I continued to have it started back again. For the last almost 7 years, myself and 8 other people, we've actually done a lot when it comes to education. We try to do as many as we can. We're in the process now of doing one in Birmingham, Alabama, because most of the people in that area are CBSPD. But we try to make sure that they get the education because that's something that they're lacking in that area. And it wasn't beneficial to start a new chapter, so we just decided to incorporate it all into one. So that's what we decided to do. And education is something that's very big to me, especially with what we do. We're those unsung heroes that a lot of people don't know, and they have no clue of what we do, how we do it, and actually even where we are in the hospitals. I want to be able to at least be, it's not about the status, it's not about that for me. It's about being at the table, because when we're not at the table, I see that there's a lot of decisions that are made that are not beneficial to those of us that do the job on a daily basis.
So, Brian, can I quote you as one of your platforms that you're going to draw a map of every hospital to give to administrators to show them where their SPD department is located?
You know what? That would be a great thing to do. It really would.
Okay. No, listen, I also want to bring up the fact, as you described, you got a lot of experience in the leadership realm, but also, good frontline experience, and then also supporting those local chapters, which, I'm a huge fan of that. There's so much that happens there at the local level, that's so important for career growth for these techs. But also, you've won a number of awards. I know the Healthcare Purchasing News Department of the Year Award, that is a department award. But that being said, a lot of work goes into that on the part of leaders for not only effecting that change, but just also writing it all up in the big proposal that you have to submit to HPN. And then most recently, your huge award last year at Isham for the Sterile Processing Manager of the Year. So I want to give you the opportunity to kind of, if you would, share some specifics on how you came about to win those awards and give a shout out to those who helped you get there.
Let's start with the Department of the Year. That was something that my manager at the time, which Brent Daughtry, he did so much with trying to help us build a brand new facility and to expand a particular area. With that being said, he actually had an opportunity to walk in all of our shoes to understand he's a nurse by trade. When he took over this department, a lot of people feel like, we're just glorified dishwashers. And that's not the case. And that it angers me every time someone says that, because I'm like, if you feel as though we're dishwashers, come do it for a day. You really can't get a lot of the people to do it. So what we did is we decided to ask management if they would come down to the department to tour the department for a day. We created different things. It was during October, so we made it look like a graveyard, different things. We had all these different things, and we had people walk through. We did lunch for them and all of that stuff. So that inspired Brent, myself, and Lorraine to write this letter. Brent did most of the writing, so I'm going to just be honest, he really did. He took a lot of the things that we thought and put it on paper, wrote it all up. He didn't even tell us that he was actually doing it, but he was asking us questions and different things and those types of stuff, and he actually sent it in. We had no clue that we were going to win. When we found out, I had actually moved to another facility as a manager. So he basically called me and told me, look, we can't take this picture without you. You helped us get to this point, so I want you in the picture. So if you ever look at the picture, you can see that everybody has on a certain color, and I have on something different because I moved to still the Florida hospital, but a different hospital altogether in a manager's role. As far as for the Manager of the Year, that was done because of 7 nurses that I work with at the West Palm Beach VA Medical Center. One of the things that I can tell you is that we made sure that we worked together. It wasn't a blame game. It wasn't so much of it's your fault, it's this fault. I always tell them when we go to meetings, I'm not going to point fingers at you. Please don't point them at me. Let's work together. Let's try to figure it out. And that being said, when this whole thing came out and they asked for people to write things, 7 of them wrote something. And to be honest with you, the day that I received that award, I cried like a baby because I really didn't know that these 7 men and women who are nurses that we support, I never knew that they felt the way that they felt in reference to what I did. And it wasn't just me, it was the entire department. All I did was try to be the vessel to make sure that things were a little bit easier for us to be able to have conversations instead of us talking at each other. We were able to talk to each other. So with those 2 things, we were able to get, I was able to win that award. And I didn't do it by myself, but, I thank those particular people that saw what I did tirelessly, make sure that we are good at what we do.
So, Brian, the collaboration with the OR is a major topic that we've talked about on this podcast multiple times. I wanted to know just sort of what is your vision for ISHM moving into the future?
Number one, it's an organization just like ARN. They can only do so much, but what I do see us do is be able to have just a better outlook when it comes to those particular professionals, when it comes to directors of sterile processing and those particular people that we support. A lot of them don't understand that in sterile processing, it's not so much, yes, there's a clinical aspect, but we're more technical than clinical. And what I'm seeing is that we're going backwards. We're doing what we did in the past. We feel that the person that's running sterile processing, unless it's a nurse, they're not going to get the job done, and that's not true. A lot of those nurses stand on people's shoulders like myself or like you guys. A lot of them don't have a clue of what we do. They don't really understand everything that goes into sterile processing and how we make it work. We do most of the stuff to make it at least function and do what needs to be done. And they get all the credit because they know the lingo when it comes to talking to doctors and things of that nature. Truth is, unless you're a nurse, when you sit to that table, you don't get the respect that you deserve when it comes to this field. I just really want to see all of us in this organization be able to push a little bit more towards that to get them to understand. It doesn't necessarily have to be a nurse at the helm. However, if you keep doing that, then there's no room for other people to grow. You're going to lose a lot of people, and you're going to lose a lot of the experience that is within these departments.
Could you speak a little bit to maybe the biggest challenges that you would say are facing our industry in general and ISHM in particular?
That's a very hard question because those challenges change daily. But what I can tell you is that one of the biggest challenges that I see from all the years that I've worked in the private sector, and even now that I still deal with a lot of people that are in the private sector, is that they don't have the staff to do the job that is required to do. I think a lot of people don't understand that when it comes to cleaning these instruments, there's a lot that goes into it. And if we follow the IFUs to the letter as to where it should be, we don't have enough staff. We don't, everything is based on numbers. You can't put numbers on someone's life. And that's something that I see that we're going back to. It's all about the bottom dollar. It's about how we can say, well, let's cut this job and let's do this or let's do that. And they don't realize that they're actually putting patients' lives at risk. So there's a decision to make. Either we're going to pay on the front end and let's hire the staff to get the job done, or you're going to pay on the back end and these patients sue you because you did something wrong and you didn't follow the IFU. So I think those particular people at the top need to really come down and understand what we do and make a decision. You're either going to pay to get the employees that you need, or you're going to pay that patient because you're going to make a mistake and that patient's going to end up owning half of what you earn.
Glad you brought up the question of pay. You knew this was coming on a podcast with me, but last year there was a lot of conversation amongst ISHM and membership about compensation and, really about the role that ISHM could or should be playing in the compensation challenges in the industry. Because I agree with you that I think that is the root of a lot of just the frontline challenges, finding good staff, keeping good staff, tying in the importance of certification with their own career progression. Like you hear it all the time. Well, why do I want to get certified if I'm not going to get paid more? Well, we have answers to those questions. But the question came up last year's election, does Isham have a place in answering those questions? And we're going to ask both the candidates that on this episode, so this is your opportunity, I guess, to speak to that first.
Here's what I would say in reference to that. I agree that there needs to be some changes when it comes to compensation for what our staff does. I personally have had a lot of people that I've managed and mentored that have done phenomenal jobs and did things that they were people that I could depend on to get the job done. However, what I can say and what I do know is this. Isham will never be able to have a leg to stand on to require someone to give compensation for what they do. I've worked for several hospitals. Really don't want to call the names, but I can put it to you this way. I've been in Florida for a long time, not just Florida, other states as well. And I worked in the private industry, and what I can tell you is that this is why I say we need a seat at the table. Yes, you can bring up Isham. Yes, you can say, well, Isham is saying this, that, and the other. There are things, they gave a guideline and an outline of what they feel like things should be. But again, it's up to that particular organization. I have several friends that have worked at several different organizations, and I promise you, I can speak from experience for myself. There was one particular organization that I worked at, and I worked at 9 different hospitals within that same organization. And the reason I moved 9 different times was because even though it's all up under the umbrella, each of them paid differently. And the only way that we're going to be able to change that is if we have a seat at the table and we have people that are actually going to fight for us in order to make that change. Yes, I can speak on Isham all day long. Yes, Isham can sit to the table. But if Isham does not have a person that sits on the board for HCA, I'm just using HCA or Florida Hospital or Tenet or Bethesda, these are all of the areas, hospitals that are in my area. If we don't have people in Isham that sits on these particular boards, there's nothing that they can do, because this decision is going to be made by those particular bean counters that actually sit on the boards of these particular organizations. I'll be honest with you. I helped one organization get a pay increase because of something that I did. We wrote out some different things. I was able to outline some things to help in that aspect. But it goes back to who's that person in charge. And if that person doesn't feel like they're going to fight for their staff, then it's not going to change, whether Isham steps in or not, because they don't have the final say-so. So I do agree that there needs to be more of a compensation for what we do. And I think that a lot of people take it for granted because they think that we're just glorified dishwashers. But I welcome anybody that sits up in those high-rise positions to come downstairs and do my job for one day. I promise you they will get it back.
That's a fantastic answer. And I'll also just say, as you brought it very full circle with come do a day in my shoes and glorified dishwashers, I want to wrap the interview with maybe some thoughts for somebody who's just coming in. And this show has really been all about this, is how do we elevate the profession? And I know that's exactly what you were just talking about, is how do we elevate the profession? How do we get a seat at the table? How do we have influence? And so let's say there's a brand new SPD technician with really big dreams for their career and what they want to accomplish and contribute to the profession themselves. What are some words of advice that you would have for them on how to grow and find fulfillment in the sterile processing industry?
What I would say is, if you are a brand new person walking into sterile processing, you have to look at it this way. Look at whose lives you're touching. Every instrument that you touch, everything that you do, everything that you accomplish, there's at least 5 to 6 lives on the other end that you've touched and affected and you don't even know it. I would tell them, you need to make a decision on, is this something that you really want to do? Why? People feel like there's repetition in what we do, and it isn't, because every surgery is different. I would say take the time to get to know your craft, learn, and don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you don't know, not asking a question can cost somebody their life. So I would say, if you're looking to come into sterile processing, really take a look what you want to do and where you want to go, because trust me, if you put in the time, you'll be able to get to where you want to get.
Brian, you certainly got there, and you took a long road as well. I appreciate you giving us 20 minutes to get to know Brian Reynolds as we prepare for this election, but I think you gave everybody real good insight into who you are as a person and who you are as a leader and all the reasons why someone might choose to vote for you. And I want to thank you for coming on the show in advance of these election times and sharing your insight.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate it.
That was Brian Reynolds, Assistant Chief of Sterile Processing Services at the Birmingham VA Medical Center. Up next, Tony Thurmond will be right back. Joining us now is Tony Thurmond, CS Manager at the Christ Hospital Health Network in Ohio. Tony, I want to thank you for coming on the show in advance of the election that's coming right up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys.
So we're kind of doing this in a standardized format in fairness to both candidates, and I'll ask you the same thing that we asked Brian, which is to give us a little background on who you are and how you ended up in the sterile processing industry.
My current role is the manager for central services for the Christ Hospital Network in Cincinnati, Ohio. So Christ Hospital has 2 hospitals, 2 surgery centers. We employ 79 employees, technicians, and we have a vast clinical ladder. So as far as starting from technician 1 up to director role. So we feel we cover a lot of area there. My beginnings was when I went to college for a year and decided that wasn't for me because I went for the wrong reason. I went to play basketball as opposed to going for an education. So that was quickly a lesson I had to learn. So then at that point, I decided to join the Air Force. In the Air Force, I was given the role of a surgical technician. Many of the branches of the Air Force, a surgical technician also works and runs the sterile processing department. So they're a combined department. So you could be at a facility or at a location and work sterile processing for 6 months and then in surgical as a technician for 6 months, just kind of alternate roles. My first assignment, most people wouldn't say this, but I would say I was blessed in the fact that there was a small 25-bed hospital, Columbus, Mississippi, and we did our surgeries in the morning and we cleaned and processed our instruments in the afternoon. And like any military position, there is no overtime. You work until it's done. So you became very creative in preparing and getting your instruments and trays ready along with while you're doing the surgeries, if that makes sense. So you'd finish your surgeries, we'd clean them in the OR. We had a room that we cleaned them in, and then we would stage them and get ready to take them downstairs to our sterile processing. So like I said, that was my first experience, and it was an eye-opening experience. And I would say it's been my best experience because you had to do both areas. So I did 10 and a half years in the Air Force as a surgical technician, decided that I wanted to venture out into the civilian world, so to say. And at that point, got out of the Air Force in Dayton, Ohio at Wright-Patterson. So that's my wife and I had settled in the Dayton area. And she has a lot of family in the area, so we settled in Dayton. From that point on, held several positions, either as a surgical technician, worked my way up to sterile processing supervisor, and now I've managed in several roles here. Also did a brief stint as a orthopedic sales manager for about 3 years, and that was a very interesting experience. But I would be in the OR helping the surgeons with the procedure, and many times wanted to reach over and kind of help, but was unable to do that. So, of course, that led me to know that my desire was still back in the OR. So, total 35 years working in the operating room and sterile processing. It's been a great career. I look back on it and I've learned at each step of the road that I've taken. I feel that during my time in the military, I was able to have many different styles of leadership, that I was able to pick and choose to develop my own style of leadership, so to say. I just think that all that experience has really built me into a well-rounded technician and manager.
So, Tony, along those lines of developing as a manager, tell us a little bit about your experience as a leader.
I'm really a sports-minded person. I love basketball. I've coached basketball for many years. And I really go into the leadership role as a coach, go in with that philosophy that we're building a team, and each person on the team has vital roles. Each person may not be as strong as the other one, but together we're very strong. So I was a big fan of Coach John Wooden, coached UCLA for many years, read all of his books, posters hanging in my office. I just feel that going in with that approach where you understand everybody's role and understand what everybody brings to the table and knowing their weaknesses and their strengths to build a strong team, you can lead them very well.
Tony, you've also had experience as a leader of your local ISHM chapter. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit it's about how you got into that role, but also how you value the place of those local chapters in the larger Isham community.
Our local chapter, the Buckeye CSP chapter, which is one of 4 chapters in Ohio, that was started back in 2002. It was actually one of my prior supervisors from the military who started it. So I really just followed on from her, just attending the meetings, watching how, she ran the organization or the chapter, and just really trying to gain participation from everybody. Like many chapters, our big struggle is just getting attendance to our meetings. And when I say that, I mean we strive to have our meetings on Saturday mornings, but then those individuals, there's a lot of people who don't want to give up their Saturday morning for, classroom. There's a lot of people who can't because they may have worked a third shift. So it's really hard to capture the perfect time for everybody, but that's what we strive for. So our Buckeye chapter, we just found out that we won the Small Chapter of the Year for Isham for this year, and we'll be honored for that in Arizona. I've been the president of that chapter for about 4 years now, a little over 4 years. Before that, I held a role as communications officer. But like with many chapters, our big struggle is just getting that participation and getting somebody to just really give their time and dedication to it. I mean, it's not a lot of hard work, but everybody looks at it as it is. Our chapter has been strong. We're considered a small chapter. Of the last 6 years, we've won Chapter of the Year twice, taken second 2 other times. So we're very strong with what we do. We just need more to do it.
Yeah, I can echo that, Tony. Everybody wants the chapter to do things, but it is difficult sometimes, like you said, to find the folks who are willing not only to come, that's hard enough in itself, but then also to find those who are willing to sacrifice the time. And it's an investment of time and emotion, and sometimes if you're just getting started, it's an investment of some money too, get some pizza together and make it happen. So yeah, that's a great story, and congratulations to you and your chapter for winning the award. That's great news. So in addition to those experiences at the department level in your local chapter, you also have had a number of years now exposure to the Isham Board of Directors and then also to the executive board. And I think that's an important roles and distinctions that the voters out there would want to hear. Can you talk about what those two bodies do and then also what your role was on them?
With the board of directors, each chapter has a representative that would participate with the board of directors, whether it be through quarterly phone calls or at the national meeting. Once again, Hank, I think you can attest to this, but very little participation. So, and I don't mean to step on toes out there, but there are a lot of times where we'll have the quarterly phone calls and you only get like half of the participants calling in for it. So for the board of directors to be strong, you got to have that participation. And that starts even at the chapter level, but also as we move up the chain there, we have to have better participation with that from the board of directors. So that's some of the challenges that I've seen. And then my experience with the executive board, I was able to be an executive representative for 2 years on the executive board. And that was a very rewarding experience for the fact that my first year being on the board of directors, I was nominated to run for president. What the heck, I'll throw my name in the hat. I did it. I made it to the finalists, the one against Steve Adams. And so when the election came around, Steve won. And at that point, I was voted onto the executive board as a representative. So gaining that experience on the executive board has been just tremendous for the fact that I was able to sit and observe 3 very good leaders, Sharon Golden Green, Dave Dragosi, Steve Adams, to see how they have managed this role. I've had the opportunity to network and speak with other past presidents, like such as your Ray Tarasi, Pam Sobrowski, Rose Seavey, others, Richard Schulz, others, just to kind of get an idea of decisions made and the thinking behind those decisions. So there's a lot of history there that people outside of the boardroom don't know. And just being able to pick their brains to say, what was your thought with this when this happened, has been eye-opening for me. I think that learning the history of the organization and how each year it seems we're stepping up even more to become even stronger. I was proud to be a part of those 2 years, and a lot of work was accomplished, but a lot of work yet to be accomplished.
You know, you talked about surrounding yourself with a lot of experience to gain experience. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about your background in general as a surgical tech, because being in the repair industry, I've seen a lot of surgical techs wind up becoming surgical instrument repair technicians. I've seen surgical techs obviously move into sterile processing, some more successfully than others. Can you talk about your perspectives coming from that surgical tech background and how it's impacted your sterile processing career, and maybe how you can illuminate some of the clinical aspects to your staff?
I will say that my recent experiences, I would say the last 3 to 5 years of employees that we've interviewed in this area, and I'm not sure if it's happening around the country, but definitely in the tri-state area, is that the market is oversaturated with surgical tech programs. You got all your smaller universities putting out these programs, online programs and stuff. What we're seeing is a lot of technicians that go through this surgical tech program can't get that experience working in the OR, because once again, it's one of those things, we're not going to hire you without experience, but also by the time they get through that program, they're not really sure they want to work in the OR. And those have turned out to be some of our best hires, because they come in with an understanding of what is needed in the operating room, what is expected. And I think that's a lot of times what we've tried to pick up on and try to show our new employees who don't have that surgical experience, who don't come from other environments, is that to teach them that the urgency and teach them the what's expected in the operating room. So I know that for me, for example, I feel very comfortable walking into an operating room, talking to a surgeon about any issue he may have with the instrumentation or the procedure. And I don't think that happens a lot of times. And that's been very successful for me in my history, is to be able to go in and have that conversation, be able to talk the talk. And once again, I don't mean to sound arrogant when I say this, but a lot of times anything that goes wrong is pointed down to our direction, down sterile processing. So anything that goes wrong is pointed our way. It's very easy to go in and kind of pinpoint where the issues are and say, well, wait a minute, this was correct when it was sent upstairs. Why are we having this issue now? And it opens some eyes. It lets people know that, hey, he knows what we're talking about. So, like I said, don't mean to sound arrogant and add it back, but that has been worked in my favor quite a bit. In regards to my experience working as a surgical tech, I've worked at several trauma hospitals. So I know the urgency, I know the what has to be done and what time and how much time you have. Just know that the patient is waiting on us. And as I tell all of our new technicians and even our senior technicians, I try to remind them of this all the time, that we, in our career field, we will never get the accolades from the patients and their families. We will never be mentioned in Press Ganey survey reports. But do understand that those that are mentioned could not have done their job if we have not done our job properly and correct. And that's a hard sell. It's a hard sell to tell a person to feel that within when they don't actually see it in presence. So I think as leaders, we just have to continue to show our role in patient safety, let everybody see our role and see what we're doing behind the scenes.
So, Tony, we've talked a lot about, kind of your experience in the past. So moving forward for the future, what is sort of your vision for ISHM?
I know that currently the bylaws are being revised. That is something that we need to continue and really push some urgency on to get that revised so that as an organization we're able to answer to any issues that may arise. I also see that as an organization, in regards to our chapters, I would like to see some type of tools put together for the new chapters that are starting, for one, to and there's a lot of information out there, don't get me wrong, but strong tools to get them started and advice, and maybe have someone from the ISHM organization kind of go and mentor them through that process to get started. Also, not only for the new chapters, but for chapters that have officers that are moving on, maybe retiring or moving on, we need to be able to have support in place for them to be able to carry on that organization, that chapter. So I think that if we build tools and just really help enforce that and offer that support, we can have stronger chapters. And I think we can get chapters to work hard to gain the interest from their membership in that area. And also, I like to see that because when each chapter does a recharter every year to continue on for the next year, that's where we see a lot of chapters fall off, is where some person has retired or moved on, and then no one's willing to pick it up and run with it. I think there just has to be stronger support there to help these chapters get through these transitions, as well as just continuing to help them build their gain strength in their territory, in their area.
That's a great point there, Tony, about the session planning on chapters and the importance of that. Having just gone through that personally, I know the fear on behalf of the chapter itself, thinking, is there going to be someone to step up, and are we going to continue the success that we've built on for years? And you're right, you can have a very established chapter just fall off the map because there wasn't anyone there to carry the torch, if you will. So that's a great focus and vision there. As you remember last year, in the 2017 election, there was a lot of conversation regarding compensation and the challenges in the industry. I'll admit, a lot of that conversation was started from me, but it was definitely one of those questions that a lot of membership in ISHM, I guess, latched onto as well. And then, of course, on behalf of the executive board, ISHM ended up issuing a statement regarding compensation, ISHM's perspective on it. But we've been asking both candidates on this show just what your thoughts are as a potential president-elect regarding the existing compensation challenges in the industry and just the place that ISHM would play in trying to fix that.
Well, I feel that is a challenge. It depends on what part of the country you're in. It's various degrees of pay from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think it needs to start at the level with individual directors and managers. And when I look in my city alone, Cincinnati, when I look at Cincinnati, we're not one of the highest paying departments throughout the city. I mean, we all talk and everyone knows what other departments are paying. We know we're not there. But I think as directors and managers, we need to continue to get that information to senior leadership to just show how important our role is, to show the importance of the education, certifications. One of the things that's been successful for myself in our facility is that we have a career ladder that's many steps to it. So it's not just, you get there and that's where you're at for many years. I think that directors and managers just need to get creative and rework the job descriptions to show the strength of the technician, show the strength of certification. I know, for example, our facility, we have a 1-year mandatory certification. So we just don't ask people to come in and within 1 year get certified. I mean, we have an educator who teaches a course for them. It's all paid for. They come in, they get paid for coming in to do the program, as well as, we're going to mentor them to get them their certification. Unfortunately, we've lost a few very good technicians that were just awesome technicians, but because of our policy, that 1 year point, they did not have their certification. We had to part ways. I think what we need to do is just continue to show senior leadership in our facilities that, what our technicians bring to the table. And like I mentioned earlier, I have several who have surgical technology degrees that work in our department. So I'm able to go and strengthen up the job description to show, hey, look, we're not only hiring sterile processing technicians, we have surgical technicians who are performing this role. So it starts there, if you ask my opinion. It starts at the department level to have your senior leadership buy into it. And I can say I'm very blessed here at Christ Hospital for the fact of when I've asked for additional FTEs, they've granted it. I mean, like I said, 79 technicians. There's not a lot of hospitals that will say that. But I think that's where the push needs to come from. And then ISHM's role with that would be to provide that education and certification program and keep challenging these technicians through testing and through certifications.
And we're just about out of time, Tony, but I did want to ask you this one. What advice would you give to a brand new SPD technician on how to grow and find fulfillment in the sterile processing industry?
I share with them my experiences. That I came from a farm boy from down in Kentucky. Never knew I'd ever step foot into an operating room. And I think there's opportunities for a person that gets into sterile processing. There's many avenues that they can branch off into. I've seen them go from all the way up, to sales representatives. So leadership as well. So there's many avenues that they could take. And I think that I just ask them to take all the opportunities provided to them, seek opportunities, seek educational opportunities as well, and continue to build upon the strength of their knowledge, because knowledge is power. And if those individuals continue with that push and just have confidence in themselves, they can be a very good technician.
Well, I share your love of basketball, and we'll have to put that on pause for another appearance on the show, maybe later in the year. But I'd love to dive into the basketball conversation with you for sure. And I know that there are definitely a lot of transferable leadership themes from sports over to any management position, and many good books out there like the one you mentioned to help people, as you just mentioned with the education, how to grow your career. A lot of good books that have transferable skills and information, and then that can be applied in any profession. So wanted to thank you again for coming on and sharing your insights as we head into this election season.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. You guys are doing a great job. I enjoy listening to your podcast, and I think you guys are doing a great job.
That was Tony Thurmond, Central Services Manager at the Christ Hospital Health Network in Ohio. Hank, Mike, a couple of great interviews as we head into the election season. I know tomorrow, March 6th, opens the ballots, so to speak. Both of these individuals, strong background, strong resume, good vision for the industry, weren't afraid to have the conversation around compensation. I think for Brian, the thing that really stood out to me was something at the very end of his interview, but you can't just take somebody who's clinical like nurses, throw them into the profession and expect them to be ready to do the job day one. There is just an enormous amount of learning, as we're all aware, to become successful in this industry and navigate patient safety.
I really appreciated talking to both of these guys, and even though they have very similar credentials and they've both been in the industry for a long time, they also have very different backgrounds and in some sense, different visions for what are the major challenges that are facing our industry in ISHM. I was glad for the opportunity not only to talk to them personally tonight, but also to put all of these ideas in front of the voters who will be able to make a decision here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Hank, and along with those voters, the decision, that has to be made, I think something that we can all agree on is the importance of ISHM members getting out there and voting. You've heard the candidates now. You've heard what they are. You've seen their write-ups in communique. Please go and vote. Make your opinion known. Make your vision and your opinion for the future of ISHM known, and get that out there.
Yeah, and I'll add one other thing. Make sure you go grab your communique and read up on the candidates, and definitely share this episode so that, again, voters that are informed make good votes as well. And I just think the more everybody knows these candidates, not everybody's had an opportunity, like myself, to meet Tony or Brian. And so with the write-ups that are in the communique and this episode, I'm hoping that that's helped introduce people, and maybe that motivates them to go out and vote, because it is very important as far as the direction of ISHM moving forward. Two great, solid candidates, though. I don't think you can go wrong here. That's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. If you have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, or if you'd like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.